afternoon is entitled The Path to Identifying, Developing and Implementing an Innovation to Harness the Power of Immediate Feedback. Just as an introduction to Collaborate, I'm not sure if you've used Collaborate before. Brent will be presenting for roughly 30 minutes and then we'll have time for Q&A. But feel free to enter any comments, any questions into the chat box as we go. I'll try to monitor that and respond or get Brent to be aware of those as they occur. Also, I'm not sure, Brent, if you're still intending to, but our discussion yesterday, Brent was going to maybe link to a couple of videos that are on YouTube by just adding the links into the chat box. So hopefully Naomi and Elaine and any others have got access to the web so that you can view those. So without further ado, Brent, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I just put a link in there to a video I might go to soon, and I put recording on as well, so that we're recording the session. I struggled a bit to know where to start with this because there's not necessarily a defined start. So I thought the way I would approach it today, and given there's so few of us, I guess we could be a bit more interactive. Firstly, I'll talk about what the innovation is, and that's an instant feedback practice set. Then I'll talk a bit about some of the excesses, or some of the successes, maybe some of the limitations, and I'll start the process of walking through the pathway from the start to where we are now. Well, it probably won't actually be the start, because I said it's hard to define the start with these things. I'd also like to probably raise a few things I've learned, and finally I'd like to talk a bit about innovation and can we make more of it. So that's a plan, but how we go, we'll see. So I will flag some things that I've learned before we start, so you know potential things to look out for as I go along. So firstly, a bit of background, and I guess it's stating the obvious, but not all students are the same. I teach an introductory unit, and probably like many introductory units, they're pretty much a production line process where we assume we've got all the same inputs, and so the same process will give us the outputs we want. But we know that's not exactly true. The other thing that's, I guess, is also self-evident, but probably worth stating, is students really like feedback, and the shorter the time frame between the action they do and the feedback they get, the more powerful the impact of that feedback. And so that leads into a little bit of what I've done here. So what I've done is set up what I said, an instant feedback practice set, accounting practice set, and there's a video. If you see a link in the side to a YouTube video, now it's the first 3 minutes of that will give you a real sense of what we're about to talk about in the next half an hour. So if you can, I'll now take 3 minutes and to let you go through that. And you don't need to see the full 3 minutes, but if you got to see 3 minutes of it, it would be good. But basically, I'll walk you through what the practice set looks like. So when I'm talking about things as we go on, you'll get a sense of that. Right, I hope you're able to see a bit of that video to get a sense of what we're now going to talk about, and that's the instant feedback accounting practice set. So to give you probably a little bit more context, an accounting practice set, it really is a common tool in teaching introductory accounting because it does imitate what happens in practice. And as well as that, it's a good opportunity for students to see how the whole process fits together. At UNE, we've probably used an accounting practice set for all of this century and beyond, but mostly it was used as an assessment task, and it was a great assessment task, but in order to provide instant feedback, it wasn't really going to work as an assessment task directly. So I had to radically change how I assessed the practice set, and I did that by way of some quizzes, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Let me just explain instant feedback, what some of the key elements of the feedback are. So if you see, here's a sample page, and there's a number of elements of feedback. So firstly, we'll notice the cells, they're green. So you notice the cells down the bottom that are to be completed are not green. This one over here that's completed, 167, 1570, it's not green. Why? Because the information is not correct. So when students enter data in and it goes correct, and it's correct, it goes green. And that's turned out to be quite compelling for some students. And I said, in the video, it's almost addictive. And for some students, that instant feedback does really work. The next bit of feedback is their updates. So this is how they're going on this particular worksheet. You can see they're 90% complete, and the practice set as a whole, they're 38% complete. There's also a page that comes from their overall dashboard. It's just a graph to give them an idea of where they are missing things. So this one, there's one transaction not completed, so there's an even amount they're missing. So they're about 90% on the quantity, on the cost, unit cost, on the total cost, dates, and total. Now, for each page, there is a graph like this, and that comes up on the dashboard. And as well as the dashboard, there's also a progress report page, which will give them itemization of where they're missing information. So that's the feedback, but as well as feedback, there's feedforward. And the feedforward, there's 28 videos there that really walk students through the process. So some of the videos were developed to explain the concepts, but mostly they're just a step-by-step process of what the student should be doing in the practice set. And they can run for up to 20 minutes each. Mostly probably around the 15 mark, the shortest one probably 5, and pretty common around 10. Initially they were hosted on YouTube, and YouTube gives really great usage information of where students are looking at stuff or where they're stopping, and which becomes quite valuable. But I now host them on our Echo 360, and the reason I've done that is it enables me to get feedback on what students have watched, what particular video. So I said I'd talk a bit about the assessment. So we've got that the practice set, which once was assessed as an assignment, but now there's 2 quizzes in weeks 6 and 8, but we have a break in between there where they're tested on the concepts that we cover in the practice set. So previously it was assignment for 10 marks, assignment for 20 marks, and now it's 2 quizzes for 10 marks each. So what benefits have we got out of it? And then, so we'll go through this and then I'll step back. So three big things has been an improvement in grades, feedback from students that it is helping them with their learning, and there's also in the final exam there's signs of deeper learning. So let me look at each of those in a bit more detail. So, a key measure of effectiveness is whether or not they pass the unit. There's a number of other ways I'm breaking this down, but this graph shows the pass rate in the unit for trimester 1 now since 2012. And 2012, well, 2013 was the first year that we put in the practice set project, and admittedly results were gradually improving before 2012, but we can see since 2012 we've gone from a bit over 50% pass to getting up towards 65. So at 400 students that enrol in the unit, that's about 10%. That's about 40 students that are passing now that weren't before. The percentage pass rate is based on every student that's enrolled in the unit. So it's not just those that are there at the end or those that were there at census date. It's based on every student that was enrolled. But as you can see, we've still got pretty significant issues because there's still a lot of students that are not passing. The next thing was a bit of feedback from students, and I would say I would have hundreds of written feedback from students about the benefit of the practice set, but this is probably my favourite. It came from last year, and it's probably the last sentence is really the one that grabbed me. But it's and a student that enrolled in accounting, not because they wanted accounting, but just because there was heaps of jobs. And then the bit I really liked is, thank you heaps, and Mum's astonished that I've a basic grasp of some of the accounting principles. And so for some students, it really is working. Is it for all students? Well, we'll have to look at that. And the other thing is some indications of deeper learning, at least for some students. Some issues that we once considered difficult in the final exam, some of them are now coming in the easy category, and that's things like perpetual inventory and special journals, and they're both areas that are covered quite a lot in the practice set. And the other thing we find with some extended response questions, we see not textbook answers, but students actually explaining what they did in the practice set. So they're explaining what they did. So they're really understanding what's happened, but it's not the typical textbook answer. So there's some of the benefits. But benefits are not equally distributed. There's some students that are not engaging, but we can see some students have not been engaging for forever. So males seem to be benefiting more than females. The increase in average marks is much higher for males, and also, interestingly enough, for married women. And how do I know married women? Well, they're just the ones that have Mrs. in their title. And I was pretty puzzled by that, but I did get some insight in possible causes for that when doing interviews with students about the use of the practice set and about the value of the practice set. Well, not the value of the practice set, the value to someone who's been out of the workforce for a long time, sorry, not out of the workforce, out of study for a long time, they're not confident, they're not knowing how they're doing it, and all of a sudden they're getting feedback after feedback that they're doing things correctly. And for a number of people, or a number of married women, they were the answers that come back. They really like that affirmation that they were on the right track after so many years of not knowing what to do. There's other benefits. So clearly there's a reduced marking time. Initially the practice set took about an hour to mark, and now, well, I guess we've got to mark the quizzes. There is a consistent quality of the marking. So yeah, every practice set is marked exactly the same way. We can address a lot more complex issues in the practice set, and we can explain them as we go along. The practice set really does become a place where we can use to explain things that we do in lectures. I've also got to say, and it's probably most innovations, these things didn't happen at once. It's been a gradual process for moving from a paper-based assessment to a computer-based assessment, and finally to the instant feedback practice set. I'll go through the road to the development, and we'll probably go through this pretty quickly just to highlight some of the key areas. But I'll put in here what drove me down this path probably is the term now that's come big data. When I first started with this, I didn't have the name big data for it, I just called it metrics, and I was talking to my students about a new area coming in accounting. But in the last few years, big data has become such a big issue in accounting. And this project has also become really relevant for educating the students about big data and its relationship to accounting. So what I'd like to do is talk just a little bit about big data, and then see how the development of this followed the path of big data. And probably in education we're more likely to call this, data analytics. But here's the accounting area. One thing I say about big data, there's just so many definitions of big data. What I've been working on is saying at its essence, it deals with how we capture from a variety of sources, categorize, summarize, and report data in order to make decisions. Now that is relevant because it mirrors the accounting process, and I'll match that up in a few moments. But one other thing just to highlight how big an issue big data has become in accounting, and there's so much out there. But Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand have said that by 2017 they'll need an extra 35,000 data analysis. Now, is that significant? The total membership of Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand is probably about 100,000. So in terms of an area that's exploding, this is an area that is exploding. So, and it's good to be able to use the practice set to give instant feedback, while at the same time demonstrating how accounting information is used, and also demonstrating how we're having a significant change in accounting. I've put this together, and the first bit's the accounting cycle. We record information in a journal, in a ledger. So I'll start again. We record information in a journal, we post to the ledger, and we summarise in the trial balance and report in the financial statements. And that's how that's mirrored by the capture, categorise, summarise, and report for big data. And there is also some refinements to big data, which there's not the place to look at them now. So let's look at what happened here. It's just for a process, I guess, of coming up with an innovation, and coming up with a number of things. But I will look at this project through the lens of big data, and is how I captured the information, categorised it, summarised and reported it for the purpose of developing an innovation. Stage one is to capture, but actually the first stage you've got to do, like you have to do in accounting, is to categorise. And before you capture data, you need to work out how you want to capture it, and in what categories. And so a big thing here was the factors that shape the categories, and there was three key factors that shaped what categories I selected. One was the ease of collection. Some data's already there. How reliable is the data, and particularly can I cross-check it? And what's the value? There's a cost-benefit trade-off with this data. So how much effort do I want to put in to get a little bit of data that may or may not be valuable? To break that down a bit further, I said look at the data that's easy to collect or already available, and a lot of stuff we collect in the normal course of business, such as assessment results. But the decision I needed to make here was the granularity of that collection. So you just want assessment, the grade for the unit, the grade for each assessment task, the marks for each components of assessment tasks, or individual answers and ancillary data, the time taken to complete assessment tasks, or for quizzes, on-campus quizzes, where a student physically is located in the room when they did the quiz. And I've ended up collecting all that data because I've found that all of it gives some insight to where things are going. And that's probably the nature of big data. You collect data from a number of sources. Then there was the categories of data that was in the normal course of business. And then there was probably categories of data. And one of it is the data I need. And some of the data I needed was the ability of the students in some ways. So before they started, so what was their maths ability? How did they learn? What was their learning style? And also about work experience. So this involved, giving them questionnaires and quizzes before the unit started. And then there's also, this other information we just, collected, and especially there was paper for tests, collect information from people, so doing interviews, having group discussions, doing surveys using Qualtrics, and also our student management system and student learning system. And obviously a really big area being academics is the literature. What does the literature say about the area of feedback, which was particularly. And then the final stage is to summarise the data so it can be reported, but I won't go into that too much at the moment. So the purpose of reporting was to identify some interventions, and so that then come back. So how do we do it? Let's unpack that a bit more. So we'll go to the area of what these various sources told us about the interventions that we might want to make. And I'll start with, as I said, being academic, starting with the literature. And probably the biggest area is there's so much stuff on feedback, literature on feedback in all sorts of ways, goes back 150 years. And there's, I guess, some of the key people that started down the area of feedback, and that's been refined as we've got along. And so when you've got 150 years of feedback, you can get some pretty valuable stuff. And now that's narrowed down into the area of feedback of its role in education. And there's just so many people have put material there, but I won't go through this because what I'd like to do a bit later is unpack the importance of immediate feedback. And I just think I'll put something here on how I matched up with, I'll just go through this because we're getting, I said, towards 12:30 now. So I guess the key things that come out of that feedback and what the characteristics of feedback should be was that feedback needs to compare actual performance to desired performance. It also needs to provide a bridge to the gap between the desired performance and the actual performance. The frequency of feedback is important, and if it's contextualized, it's valuable, and also if it's immediate. So I'd like to talk about what I did to get the practice set to comply with what the literature said. So looking at those one at a time, compares actual feedback to performance. So the obvious answer there is when a value is entered in the cell, if it's correct, the cell goes green. What's the guidance on bridging the gap? Well, there's 28 videos that explain each step of the way. And frequency is important. In the practice set, there's over 1,000 entries on which the students are provided feedback, and that feedback is immediate in terms of the score, the cell turns green, and when they've entered the correct answer. And the bottom bit is contextualise. If it's contextualised, it adds value, and obviously a practice set is an attempt to contextualise an activity because it imitates what happens in practice. So that was the literature, a key source of information, and there is then just a list of what some of the other sources of information were, and we can say, there's just a general information you get out of your learning management systems, but you've got to collect some other information as well. And there's even information I found relevant, was like whether or not a student provided a phone number. That was a bit of a clue to how a student was going to go in certain contexts. Had the student studied the unit before? That was a big clue again on how the student was going to go and what you needed to do. Obviously needed also feedback from people, and highlighted the difference between, I guess here was a real start point for me, a focus group. Early on I thought my feedback was great, and in a focus group I had with students, I asked, they said, feedback could be quicker, and we started, I was really surprised at that because I got my assignments back so quickly because I'd automated the marking. And a comment I got which really stuck with me is the best time to get feedback is when you've done the task, not weeks later after the assignment comes back. So that shaped a lot about what I look for in the practice set. Other bit of feedback was speaking to the accounting profession, was they clearly wanted more exposure to spreadsheets, which the practice set does. And there was also, which has come in recent times, a big explosion, an explosion in big data. It's, I said that before, but that's something that's changing the world of accounting and I guess of education as well. So the stages in the process, we became paper-based. Well, in 2009, I turned the assessment from a paper-based one into an online Excel spreadsheet. And so marking became more consistent, marking became quick, and it was just a matter of I had a hidden marking sheet in or data collection sheet in the student spreadsheet, and I dumped that into a marking sheet, and then that automatically produced a report with a bit of human intervention. In 2013, we moved to the instant feedback accounting practice set, but that meant that then it was no longer an assessment task as an assignment, but it became an assessment task as practice set quizzes. We developed the videos and also aligned it with a project by Leo, who's going to present in about 2 weeks his virtual internment program, which is a second-year accounting, and we're trying to get these two programs to work together. And that's probably one other thing. Innovation often comes in pockets. So 2014 we updated the menus, put better presentation. In 2016 we've got better integration with the study notes. So some quick limitations. There's over 5,000 calculations throughout the spreadsheet, and not all of them are needed. Some of them are put there for when we upgrade it, but there's still a few things wrong. mistakes take a long time to fix. And you might get, and it might just be a cell you've got hidden that should, well, protected that shouldn't be protected, or there's so many just little things. You think you get the big things right, and then there's just little things that take a bit time consuming to fix up, or worse still, when the students get it to address it with them. Other limitation is clearly not all students are getting equal benefit, and some are not engaging at all. And if you want to upgrade it for new content, it is a big investment. Even though we try to set it up so that it could be, the upgrading of it could be automated, it's still a big process. And the, I guess, challenges is really how to get students involved, and how to get it just more engaging for those students that are not in it. And I'd like to talk about probably some of the innovations when we have a bit of a chat, if we do have a bit of a chat, I guess. What have we learned? We learned that a really high proportion of students do respond to instant feedback. And a number of those students do find it exceedingly motivating for those cells to go green. And when we do other tasks and the cells don't go green, they get a little bit antsy. And some students really get into it. As I said, that's probably been more inclined to be males than females. The other thought I'd like to have is just about innovation generally is that, as I've looked through this, I've naturally read a lot about innovation, and I guess some key takeaway messages is that innovation occurs in pockets, and a question, if you're interested in innovation, you'd have is how do you get into one of those pockets? Which, with online communication now, that's got to be so valuable. And one of the things that I'd be interested in down the track is just finding out who's interested in forming a pocket, and just seeing if there's ways we can go about facilitating just people that are interested in innovation and just communicating. Now, you look through the history of great inventions, great discoveries, and you often find there was a lot of people thinking down the similar paths that were communicating. So that's, I guess, the key bit of the material. I did try to cover a fair whack, but I now see if there's any questions or any thoughts, or is there anyone still there? I probably should have asked that question.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly still here, Brent. Thanks very much for that. If anybody would like to put any questions to Brent, please either put them in the chat box or just use the talk button. There should be availability for everybody to talk. Or if you want to talk, there's a little hand up, raise hand button in the middle panel on the left.
Yes, Naomi. Excel is actually a really powerful thing.
Question there, Brent.
But it's another reason for using Excel as opposed to something else is because it's in accounting. Now, if it wasn't in accounting, would I use Excel? And it's just students need to. Well, as I say, feedback we got from the profession is they really want students to have exposure to Excel. Yes, Elaine, I'll show you. I'll go back to some of those things. I can probably do this quite quickly. Thanks to Mark's training yesterday. So the 2012 was the year before we had it. These results are the percentage of students that have passed the unit, and as we say, it's still not very high, but we can see since it's been implemented and upgraded each year, there's been an improvement. The And then some of the other bits of feedback, I said I get a lot of written material from students. I said I would have, over the 3 years, with certainly in the hundreds of written feedback. But I said here was my favourite one, and it's just the last line, or the last sentence is what I really enjoyed, was that thank you heaps, and Mum is astonished at the basic grasp I've got of accounting. And then there was also stuff about the depth. Thanks, Elaine, for the question.
Brent, I would quite like just to throw in a question that's perhaps not so much about the instant feedback, but I'm just interested in the difference between the practice sheets and the instant feedback, yep, and the resources that you've created in the videos. There's 28 videos, you said, which in itself is a lot of work. Have you had any feedback from students as to perhaps which they find the most useful, like the instant feedback or the videos, or is it the combination of the two?
It all works together.
How heavily are the videos used?
No, the videos, again, the thing I really learnt is not all students are the same. But there is a lot of students that rate the practice set videos as the #1 resource in the unit. I can't put my hand on that information at the moment, but I do. They send out questionnaires towards the end of the unit to rate the various resources. And so almost always it's something to do with the practice set. But the practice set videos always rate really highly. The other advantage they probably have is, clearly this is not divorced from the other material we study in the unit. So often when we have study stuff in a topic, it can be referred to the practice set videos to go and see how it's done. And that also has the advantage that students will then have a context for the answer, not just what that video is. But you're right, there's a fair bit of work in putting them together, and I really do need to redo them. When I first thought I'd do it, I thought, and this is how it was for the first few times I did it, 20-minute video would take me 20 minutes, and it did. But then, to be more effective, you want to put some comments on there, and you want to zoom into certain areas, and you only want to show part of the screen so that it's big enough. And so, a 20-minute video now would take a lot more than an hour. Is anyone else doing stuff on feedback? Sounds like we're running dry on questions.
Brent, I was just going to make a comment too. I put that a little bit further up. I think what you've done with the spreadsheets and the formulas that can give instant gratification, if you like, is very doable in a subject like accounting. And I think that there's a challenge there for some of the other maybe softer subjects where answers to questions are not quite so exact. What would your advice be about approaching the idea of feedback in areas like that?
Yeah, I think this process is not going to be able to be, it's not a glove that's going to fit that process. But I suspect there would probably be some clues in it, and not probably for the really in-depth stuff, but I guess there'd be graduated things of how you could develop feedback, automate your feedback reports. There's probably another part of this story where where I really did, probably where this idea really did come from. Before academia, I was in an applied research business, and it did obviously rely on a lot of numbers, and because we were looking at the performance of businesses and how to improve the performance of businesses, and a lot of that comes from those businesses filling in questionnaires. Now, a lot of it was the actual financial data, but there was also information about, you know, the exercise they did, their staff structure, and all things that weren't financial information. But we were able to design a report that we could dump straight into, you know, we take their answers and we develop something that sucked them out, and we dump them straight into a report writer, and it completely generated their reports in, you know, instantly. And now we did that more as a time saving and a quality control mechanism, but I guess it shows it can be done not just on the raw financial data. But you know, it's something you'd really have to think about, and you know, I think it could work, but you know, so the other thing would be programs like NVivo, and you just wonder about you know, using them to automate some degree of the process. I see there's another question there, but long question.
A great question there from Elaine about the sustainability of the resources, about updating.
Yeah, so yeah, it does take some time, but I guess you compare it to, say, where we were before, where you have an assignment that takes about 100 hours to write. So 100 hours. You've got an assignment that takes about an hour to mark. If you've got 300 assignments, there's 300 hours you can potentially invest in something else. So that, you know, so it's more sustainable in a big unit. It's and it's scalable for you. If it was 1,000 units, 1,000 students, it would be better still. So you need some scale already to make it work. But if you've got some scale, it's doable. But then you've got to set aside the time and do it. I've got another question. Yeah, well, I've got to agree with that. Is you've got to find some way to give that feedback as quickly as possible. And the other thing with feedback is, and marking generally, you probably do want some standardisation. So you don't want feedback that's below par. So if I was to try to unpack the steps in this, would be to model. This is probably also partially an answer to Mark's question for earlier, and I could think about it and probably give a better answer. But I think the starting point is to model the current process for giving feedback, and then try and model what you think best practice would be. If giving feedback, and we had all the time we had, can you model best practice, and then see how we can break that best practice down into steps, and then see what each of those steps how could each of those steps be supported by automation. That's what I would think that the starting point would be. And if I thought about it more, I'd probably come up with a bit more detailed approach, because clearly this is something I've thought about a lot over the last 5 or 6 years. Well, there's some good questions. Are there any other good questions? Well, actually, even not good questions. It'd be probably nice to have any question.
Brent, how many people do you work with? Have you got a team of lecturers that you work together? Does everybody agree on the approach? Is there been any discussion about whether this is the right way to go?
Well, I guess it took a while to get to that process, and so I guess in our accounting team, I did talk about what I was doing for some time, and I was probably, because it seemed like a pretty radical change, was a bit reluctant to do it. But once I've done it, I think many others that are seeing what's there understand the value in it, and have probably try to see what things they could do, not to necessarily replicate this, but like you look at other people around you and see what they're doing and see what you can get from them that might work, and so and results are positive. Like if the results sucked, that probably would have been going back to some other mechanism. There could have been a number of different paths I'd taken going through this, and is this the best path? I don't know, but it's a better path than the old path I was on.
Yeah, I'd have to say it must be quite gratifying to see the improved results. It would be sort of heartbreaking really to put all that effort in and not see an improvement in results, so well done.
Yeah, it would be, I tell you.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
Coming to an end, Mark, unless there's another.
Any more comments or questions for Brent?
Thanks, Naomi. Actually, before I go, is there anyone there that's doing stuff that, anyone else interested in innovation? Or just as well, what is innovation? So, Elaine, where are you at? And what area are you in? Because if anyone wants to keep in touch and just talk about things generally, I'd like to stay in touch with well, Elaine, I'll give you my email. I'll put my email up. I should have done that somewhere else. And I'll put that up, and if anyone's interested in just innovation generally, and we might get some, I talked about innovation comes in pockets, and maybe we can get some pockets started. So if anyone's interested in it, just send me an email to touch base. Thank you, Elaine, and thank you for everyone else that come. Thank you, Naomi.
Okay, thanks, Brent. I think we've had a good session. Yeah. I will imagine that Andre will send out the link to the recording to all the participants and all those that registered. So hopefully something else can come of this. I think that the idea of innovation has many aspects, many dimensions, and you've certainly hit on one of those, which is the value of providing instant feedback, Brent. So well done, good project, and well deserving, and thanks all for coming and participating, and please keep an eye on the continuing series of webinars that ASCILITE is providing. So with that, I'll thank you all and wish you a good afternoon.
Right, thank you very much. And Elaine, I have been to UTS, or From what I hear, it's a pretty impressive accounting area. My daughter works for Chartered Accountants Australia, New Zealand, and she tells me that UTS is the best place to study accounting. So, alright, goodbye everyone.
Well, thanks, Brett. Bye, everyone.
I did hit the recording, so I guess I just now press record and stop it.
That's the one.
Yeah.